So we're more involved with projects than except the established clients that we have. But we do have a young man in the office, John Lee, who is very, very good, and he's working with some young actors and performers, and he's very excited about a few of the people. A couple of them are in pilots, and uh, so we're still very active. And of course, Howard, who's so brilliant and creative business-wise, he started the whole Dean Martin show, Direct Response, with Guthrie Ranker. Started with the Dean Martin roasts that are being from Direct Response with infomercials. That was hugely successful. And then the Dean Martin Variety Show, which is hugely successful. So we're more involved in projects now and producing, but it's a great balance, between working with the clients that we have, and as the young ones that John Lee is working with, emerge. We'll have some fun with that, but we don't have the responsibility of starting people off like we did, which was a joy. But now we're finding more fun in doing new projects and producing things and doing some documentaries and a couple of pilots and television series and movies.
And tell me about your storm window deal, man.
We were just looking at this, I'm pushing this over in front of Bill, this original letter that you're sending to Brandon Tartikoff. Let's talk about the first TV series that really took off and exploded probably beyond your wildest dreams. But how did that come about? How did you sell it to NBC? How did the whole project come together for Seinfeld?
Well, Jerry Seinfeld was doing The Tonight Show, and he was doing Letterman. And I constantly sent letters to Brandon Tartikoff every time he had a good television show. I don't know if he saw the Letterman show or the Tonight Show. I would send him some tapes of that. And then Jerry was working primarily in comedy clubs at the time. Then in 1988, he was doing his first real concert. He was just working comedy clubs. He was doing his first real concert. So I believed in Jerry, in having a television series. So I wrote this letter to Brandon Tartikoff because it was a good connection. Because Jerry just had a nice, 2-3 page spread in People magazine as an emerging young comedian. And also he was playing Town Hall, New York, which was his first theater concert. It was the first time he'd be in a theater. So I sent this letter to Brandon Tartikoff saying, call me a crazy guy, but I think Jerry Seinfeld will soon have a series on NBC and blah, blah, blah. And I think it's worth coming to see him, or any of your associates. You're invited, to Town Hall, to see him. But no one came. No one came to Town Hall. But the letter itself triggered a meeting where Brandon said, maybe we should bring him in for a meeting, and Warren Littlefield was the head of comedy, and Brandon was there, and Rick Ludwin, who's the head of specials in late night television, he knew Andy very well and liked him because he did the Tonight Show and Letterman, so he was well aware of him.
You mean Jerry?
Yeah, he was very aware of Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, Rick Ludwin, he was very helpful. So we came in for a meeting with Brandon and Warren Littlefield and Rick Ludwin, and they had a nice talk. Jerry said that, they said, if you do have an idea, for a series, we're very interested in having you, be part of NBC. Jerry just made one thing clear. He said, I'm not going to play a character like a shoe salesman or an accountant or, a father that has a job. If I do anything, he knew this. He came out with the essence of the series, and that he would be playing himself pretty much. He didn't know what the premise was exactly. And then, 2-3 days later, he went to New York and he ran into Larry David at Catch a Rising Star, because they were both working, doing stand-up there. And he told Larry, that NBC's interested in doing a series with him, and let's talk. Then they went out for a walk after Catch a Rising Star, and they went into this Korean deli, and they made fun of all the products there and everything else, and then they went for coffee afterwards. This is what the series should be about. It should be about two comics talking about observing things, no storyline, but just two comics relating, observing funny things and talking about it. And then soon after that, they sort of had a formula. They decided against his best friend being a comic, but they should do something else. And And then they came in and they pitched the idea. We set it up with Brandon Todikoff in Brandon's office. Also, when NBC showed interest, I immediately called my cousin Rob Reiner because he was at Castle Rock and they were just starting their company, and they were young guys that Jerry could relate to, and we needed deficit financing. If a series was coming out, we needed a production company, and Columbia had invested in Castle Rock, and so they had enough money, to do deficit financing if the series got on, because all series went into a deficit. So Rob loved Jerry immediately, and Glenn Padnick and Alan Horn, and Andy Scheinman. They all got excited about it. So we set the meeting. All those people came, Howard West and myself. And one thing I could advise anybody trying to sell a television show, if you have a comic in the room, let him do the pitch. Don't let the producer or anyone else do the pitch but the comic. So Jerry, pitched this idea to them, and he was very funny, integrating some of the material from his act, got a lot of laughs. I mean, the premise was different than what happened, but right in that meeting, Brandon said, "Okay, let's do it." And then we ran back to Brandon. It's a pilot, right? It's not just a script. He said, "Yeah, it's a pilot." And then he said, "George, now you don't have to send me any more letters," because I was bombarding him with letters, and that was the last letter I ever sent to him. But it was so funny that he said that, in front of everybody. He said, "Now you don't have to send me any more letters." And I said, "That's right. You don't have to get any more letters." So then, but they ordered the pilot, and we shot the pilot, which I thought was very good. But they tested it. As you know, they do massive research when they do pilots at all the networks, and the research was very bad. The big thing was pilot performance weak. I never forget that because that was prominent. Pilot performance weak. And the research said that they felt that who cares about people going to a laundromat together, a bunch of friends going to a laundromat? How dull is that? And then they also said that Jerry needs a better backup ensemble. This is in the research. We have it framed. We all have it framed in our houses or our offices. And then one of my favorites was that they said that people resented the storyline interfering with Jerry's stand-up routine, because Jerry was established pretty much as a stand-up comedian, and he did open the show doing he had an opening and the middle and the end he did stand-up comedy because he played the part of a role, Jerry Seinfeld, a stand-up comedian. So that was that, and soon after that I got a call from Brandon saying that it's not on the schedule, So I said, okay, we better, we'll talk to ABC. We're talking to Peter Chernin, and then they asked us, to extend the option. Period. And Howard, who has good business sense, said, let's not do it. Let's not show weakness. Let's try to set it up elsewhere. Let's stick to this because this could go on and on with the extension of the option. And then finally. I had the thought of doing something, since they passed, the comedy department passed on it. But Rick Ludwin, he was in charge of specials as well as late night television. I called Rick and I said, "Rick, if you could give us 4 episodes, we'd be happy to try to do it," because Rick liked it and believed in it. And Rick said, "We have 2 specials, 2 one-hour specials we didn't order. Let me talk to Brandon. Let me get back to you." And he got back to me and said, "Look, we could order 4 half-hour specials. They would be specials because they would be coming from my department. The accounting would come from my department. It was his department regarding specials. And everything would have to come through that." I said, "That's great. Doing 4 half-hour specials would be great." So we got that order, which I think is the shortest in the history. It's probably in the Guinness Book of World Records for the shortest order at the time. So we got the order for 4. And then we started producing, those 4 episodes. We had many discussions about the direction of the show. In fact, there was one point that NBC wanted Jerry Seinfeld to marry Elaine Bennis, Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character. And Larry and Jerry, we left the office. It was Warren Littlefield's office, and we had this meeting in the parking lot. And Jerry and Larry said Rob Reiner was there, and Howard West and me, and they talked about it. I said, that's not the show we envision. Then George Costanza, Kramer would be out in left field if they're married or they have a relationship that they're living there. It's not the show we want to do. And they made the decision to do the show that they want to do, and if they don't want to pick it up, we'll do 4 shows that we're proud of, and we'll go on. They both had stand-up careers. They could make a living, And now I'll never forget that, the integrity of their creative integrity that they were willing to do. They accepted the fact that they would do 4 shows. And Larry David said, that's okay because I don't think I have more than 4 shows in me. I remember those lines. I don't think I have more than 4 shows in me, getting scripts and everything else. And Larry ended up staying with the show for 7 years. And then anyway, after the 4 shows, didn't get such a good rating, and then we were finally picked up. There was 2 years went by when we only did 18 shows, the 4 shows and a pickup 5 with the pilot, and then a pickup for 13. It was over 2 years, and when we went on, we were getting crushed by Jake and the Fat Man. I had nightmares with that Jake Fat Man ass sitting on my head. They were crushing us, Jake and the Fat Man and Home Improvement. And then, February 4th, 1993, right after Ted Danson decided, to finish up Cheers after 11 years, see, Paramount, this is a political thing in the television world, Paramount had Wings. And in order to renew Cheers, they demanded that Wings would follow Cheers at the 9:30 time slot on Thursday. Now, as soon as Ted Danson said he wasn't coming back, then they could put Seinfeld. Warren Littlefield, he had great wisdom too, and even I didn't have great wisdom about the marriage of Jerry and Elaine, but he gave it that time slot. February 4th, 1993, changed everything because they put Wings in a different time slot. We followed Cheers during that whole summer reruns, and by the end of the summer, Seinfeld was outrating Cheers, and they were on the way. And I met Ted Danson soon after that at a party, and I just hugged him. I said, why are you hugging me? He said, thanks for quitting Cheers. I said, we got that time slot. He was hysterical. Because that just shows you the little quirks and turns, that make. We almost got canceled, even after the 4 episodes and after the 13 episodes, and our ratings were low. But then something was kicking in called demographics. Alan Cohen, who worked in marketing at NBC, said, you have a very good audience. You have a young, bright audience, and I think that's going to help. And that helped. Also, the critical acclaim was great because the press loved it. The media loved it from the beginning. But it was a huge struggle until that time slot. And then it was number 1. After that, it ended up number 1 in the whole world when it went off the air with over 75 million people watching it. And then Jerry quit. Jerry was being pitched, to do the 10th season. We did 9 seasons. Jack Welch, who was the chairman of General Electric, and Bob Wright held a meeting at Bob Wright's apartment on the 38th floor of the Trump Tower overlooking Central Park on a pristine day. And Howard and I and Jerry were there. And Jack Welch wrote out a little piece of paper about what Jerry would get for the 5th season. the 10th season. And it was like $5 million an episode, times 22 episodes. And then we had this talk. He said, we'll talk about it. We walked in Central Park, and we sat down on the bench, the same bench on 81st Street in Central Park West, where Jerry, at the age of 21, told his father that he wants to go into stand-up comedy. Because we walked around, and Jerry sat in that bench, and he said, it's an incredible deal, he said, but I have to follow, my instinct as a stand-up comic. And you want to leave when they're giving you a standing ovation. And because if you stay on too long, if you stay on another 15, 20 minutes, they can say, he was really great, but he was on a little too long. And he didn't want to do that. So Jerry, in his deepest instinct, turned that deal down, and he left a complete winner. And I was happy, and Howard was destroyed. Howard West, the businessman, what? Are you kidding? No, you can't turn down a deal like that. But he went along, we all both went along with Jerry. But I think that's the reason I think that the show, in syndication and in supplemental market is one of the most successful show in history. And TV Guide voted it the #1 show ever. And he has this glow where he's selling out concerts wherever he goes. He sells out every show he does in Las Vegas. I think that has to do with that glow from him leaving at that time, when his picture was on every magazine cover. He was sick of himself, walking by a newsstand. But I think that glow, added to his momentum about his whole future career. And he still loves stand-up more than anything. He said, nothing is like that with the hair stand up in the back of my neck. He loves that more than anything, and he's going to be doing it his whole life. Do you know, I booked him in the London Palladium for his 100th birthday concert in honor of George Burns. Did you know George Burns was set to do the London Palladium for his 100th birthday concert? And, he fell in the bathtub, and he couldn't do it. So I said, that would be great for Jerry, who's he keeps in better shape than George Burns. He doesn't smoke. And so I booked it. I actually have a confirmation from the London Palladium, April 29th, 2054, for Jerry's 100th birthday concert. Because he loved George Burns. He got on some auction. He had all of George Burns' notes, all his jokes. And George Burns was amazing, and he gave good advice, He said, to be successful in show business, it's important. The most important thing is sincerity. If you fake that, you got it made. That was George Burns. Remember that?
You can fake that.
No, he was
You gotta-
great. Then he won, he won, the Oscar for, the Sunshine Boys at the age of 80. And he said it couldn't happen to an older guy. All true, No, he was incredible.
I wonder, George, if you could talk about, you said at the beginning of all this, comedy comes from, a lot of times it comes from pain, it comes from tragedy. The case of Seinfeld, that's a perfect example with the George Burns. I mean, it comes from, truth, life.
Well,
right?
it comes from truth, and Jerry is incredible as an observational comedian. Anything you think of, he's covered. And he's great. I mean, his icons were Bill Cosby and George Carlin and Robert Klein. Of course, those were the ones that changed comedy from the setup and the punchline to intelligent observational comedy, and he carried it on from there. As did Gary Shandling and Leno and Letterman when they started out. There was a lot of people that did observational comedy, and it worked for him, because when you're thinking about something, he still does great stuff. And like Carl Reiner, who was one of the champions of Jerry, I remember he said, I can't wait till Jerry gets married and has kids, because that material is going to be awesome, which it is now. I mean, he has such incredible material on that. And then there's some that bridge the gap, like George Carlin. He does the angry comedy, and he does great observational comedy. And Chris Rock also. He does, a lot of, he's very politically and socially conscious also. Remember at the amphitheater, I saw him at the amphitheater. First time was the Universal Amphitheater, and it was an incredible night for me. I was sitting between Bill Maher and Jerry Seinfeld, and they were laughing throughout that whole act. It was stereophonic laughter, which to me made my heart so happy to see comics appreciate another comic that much. They just were laughing the whole time. And there's one thing he said. He says that there's not one white man in the audience that would trade places with me, and I'm rich. He had that observation. He just did the great stuff, both observational and angry. And in fact, watching that concert, Chris Rock, that motivated Jerry from going and doing a whole new stand-up act, because he'd finished the show. He wasn't doing any stand-up, like for about a year, because it's awesome to think of, not because he did announce that he's retiring his entire act. The whole special, I'm telling you for the last time, was based on that. They buried it, all his material. They had a funeral scene at the beginning, with Alan King and everyone was there, Shandling and Leno. They buried his material. And as he was lowing, Gary Shandling pulled out one of the jokes, and Jerry sort of caught him, and he said, keep it, So they buried all his material, and then he did, I'm telling you for the last time, because this is the last time he did those jokes. And he did that on the stage, and then, but what inspired him to start again was that incredible show that Chris Rock did. It was so memorable. And all these comics were there. Everybody remembers it. It was great. He carries the torch, from Richard Pryor, with the social commentary and political and feelings, in his gut,
As you're saying this, I'm just thinking that this may be a new phenomenon, because the Friars Club, somebody came in and said that somebody bombed. Everybody loved that, and a report on success was what else is new. But it seems like there's much more of a
Camaraderie.
familial thing. Maybe it
Yeah.
starts with a Comedy Store.
Well,
phenomenon.
I think in this, when Jerry started out, he still has these same friends, and Paul Reiser. He started out with Larry Miller, and Mark Schiff. These guys, every New Year's they walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. They make it a tradition. They're still friends, and they're very supportive. Comics help comics so much now. At least with this group, from my observation, and the Friars, they still recruit. They try to recruit young comedians. Because I remember they approached me. I said, "Nah, I'm too young. I'm still too young. I still have that image that I'm too young, to be in the Friars." But the Friars was a great organization. And Red Buttons. He was always, went to the Friars Club. Remember, so when he turned 80, he was at the Friars Club. They gave him a birthday party or something, and he talked. Of course, this is self-deprecating. Even he's very observational, also, Red Buttons, through the years. So he turned 80. And he said, "You're growing old when you go to the doctor for an X-ray and they hold you up to the light." And then he said, "You're growing old when your wife says, 'Let's go upstairs and make love,' and you say you have to choose one or the other." I remember that. And then he said, when you get complimented for your alligator shoes and you're barefooted, you're growing old." He did all this self-deprecation. It's such great stuff. I miss him. He always. Talking about writing, importance, any comic, and that's the thing I would always stress, that they have to keep writing. Red Buttons wrote for every occasion. It was absolutely amazing. He tailored everything. He wrote till the day he died. He was what an inspiration for the world of comedy.
Yeah, it was interesting because when he started out, he had a reputation of being a real tough guy.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And
I
then
heard that also.
And then he just kept mellowing over the years, like a good one.
Oh yeah, I heard he was very tough when he was doing his show. Him and Milton Berle and Jackie Gleason. They were the toughest. All those people. It's a composite that Alan Brady for the Dick Van Dyke Show. Rob Petrie worked for that composite that they made of him for, Milton Berle and Jackie Gleason and Red Buttons and, all of them.
I guess it's the Comedy Store. Was Mitzi the first one that she's sure that started that, or was it the Improv?
I think what happened, the Comedy Store was the first one, I think, out here. I mean, Bud was running the Improv in New York, at the time, which was like in the 60s. And the Comedy Store was Sammy Shore, Rudy DeLuca, I think, were partners, and it was Ciro's. It used to be Ciro's nightclub, and they turned it into the Comedy Store. And Sammy Shore, he was like the main comic there. Anytime any producer came in, Sammy would go on stage, And then what happened was they got a divorce. Sammy and Mitzi Shore got a divorce, and Mitzi got the Comedy Store in the settlement. And then she started the Comedy Store. I think the Improv started soon after that when Bud started it, brought a branch of it, expanded, into Hollywood, and started the Improv on Melrose in Hollywood. And those were the two main comedy clubs in L.A. at the time.
They never had a Catch a Rising Star was strictly in New York. It didn't come
Well, they
out,
did it in other places. I mean, I think they've done it in other places. I think they were in Las Vegas, and they did, but not. I don't think Catch a Rising Star ever came to California or L.A. But they do. I think they still have it in some places. I think they may even have it in Vegas.
Yeah, in your experience, I'm thinking of the early days where, as I was saying, the Friars Club, somebody would come in, talk about success, nobody wanted to hear about it. Today,
Very true.
It seems like it's a much more familial thing.
Yeah, but I think there's still jealousies with comics. But in those days, you sort of some comics didn't mind the other comics bombing. One of Jerry Seinfeld's biggest bombs. You talk about bombing.
Yeah.
You asked me about bombing. The first time Jerry was on stage, first time on stage in his life, he was a Catch a Rising Star. And he forgot part of his act. Basically, Elaine Boozler, and I heard the story from Elaine Boozler, the same story, and Jerry Seinfeld, because Elaine Boozler was the MC at the time, a Catch a Rising Star, and she announced Jerry Seinfeld. Please welcome Jerry Seinfeld. It was his first time on stage, and Jerry came on stage, and he said he remembered the subject matter, but he didn't remember the material. So he said, "My parents." He said, "The airport, the beach," and he said, "Thank you very much." And she said, "That's Jerry Seinfeld, the king of the segways." And he forgot the act. And Jerry told me the same thing. First time I was on Catch a Rising Star, and that was amazing that he just remembered the categories.
George, we were talking. Friars Club aside, a lot of the comedians that we were just talking about, Red Buttons, Milton Berle, and Jerry Seinfeld, their acts were clean and still are. And do you see a change in comedy? I mean, talking about the younger comics today, I don't know if you work with any, but has the barometer changed on?
Well, I think it's my feeling about comedy is that there will be the comedy now. Language is accepted every place in comedy, except on network television. So comics do reach for language. Sometimes it's great, using language that might not be acceptable to some people. I mean, and in a way, it could be very good. I mean, Richie Pryor. I mean, he used every word, every word imaginable. Everything was motherfucking. But he was brought up in a whorehouse, right? It was so organic. That's how I personally would judge it about language. It seemed very organic with him. Other comics just reach for it for shock value or try to get a laugh. But my prediction is, and you can quote me, there's going to be some new comics coming up that'll be totally clean, that will be hilarious. I said comedy always works in cycles, and I think it's just a sensibility of comedians. People may be inspired by Jerry Seinfeld or Ray Romano, who's a pretty clean comic. Gary Shanley, who's brilliant, is pretty clean. Look at Steve Martin. I mean, Steve Martin had an act that sold out arenas. He had clean material. He was absolutely a phenomenon. People were dressing like him with the Wild and Crazy Guy. They came with the white suits and the arrows in their heads. It was a clean act. And I think that'll happen again. And perhaps we will help launch it with the Andy Award. We'll get some young comics. The Andy Award is going to be open for all ages, from 2 years old to 102 years old. There could be a 9-year-old, 10-year-old prodigy that could win whatever the prize is, $5,000, $10,000, have a show on television. And I have a feeling, and that the parameter is that it has to be clean. So we may launch some there. But I believe that comedy works in cycles, and there will be some brilliant comedy that's clean, and also brilliant comedy that's not clean, as long as it's funny. There has to be a formula, Carl Reiner said. 3 to 1. If you get dirty, it has to be 3 times more funny. That's a pretty good formula.
Can we go back just a little to Seinfeld, because we missed a big chunk, which was I know why you're laughing. The ensemble.
It's a schnorrer.
Yeah.
Am I almost finished?
You're almost. We're trying to get there. But I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the cast.
Is there anything Karen needs?
She will get there.
Okay, right.
But the cast of Seinfeld, how important were the actors, Julia, Michael, Jason, to what became the successful ingredient to that show?
there are so few successes in television, and every success you've ever seen is a combination of the writing and the cast. Sometimes you can have brilliant writing and the cast isn't right. This cast was monumental. I never saw such chemistry. The connection was amazing. Also, like every single show, there was absolute laughter and camaraderie and creative stimulation between everybody. It was totally open. Jerry and Larry were open. Those read-throughs were incredibly entertaining, with everybody contributing, and Michael Richards coming in with just brilliant material everyone just were laughing because they didn't expect the physical comedy that he brought to it. And Jason they all were capable of spontaneous ad libs, and those were written so much came out of the rehearsals. It was a joy. I mean what I love is that the research said that it was a poor backup ensemble. Jerry needs a better backup ensemble. Don't you love research? Don't you love the way it turned out? But that's the essence of a successful show, is having that cast. Dick Van Dyke Show, Steve Allen. Steve Allen with you guys, with Bill Dana and Don Knotts and
Louis
Nye,
Nye, Tom Post, and
what a thing that does. It just gives you an explosion of spontaneous comedy when that cast comes together. It's just absolutely a joy, and it's very rare. I think that's why there's so few hits, and that's why we appreciate them so much. Everybody loved Raymond. They also had an incredible cast. I mean, every show that's a hit show, the cast was brilliant. And there were so many shows that I've seen that were well written and it missed because it didn't have all the ingredients. And also, you have to get a good time slot. That's a good thing.
That's key. What else was your role in the Seinfeld show? I mean, were you functioning as producer?
Well, basically, I was in all the casting sessions and all the readings, and I was there every day and did what I could. I think the show was brilliantly run, by Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David. They created it, and they really were the most important people, in the creative thrust of the show. It was Larry, and it was tough for Jerry because being a producer and a star of the show, but every script was rewritten by Larry and Jerry. They went back, and sometimes Jerry couldn't be there because he was continuing rehearsal, and I would see Larry after a read through. He would actually run back to his office. He couldn't wait to run back and do some revisions. And then after Jerry finished rehearsals, Jerry would go back and had a part in his desk. They had to look at each other like this every day. And they did it for 7 years, the 7 years that Larry was there. They are the reason, show was a success combined with that incredible cast. And they got some very good writers on the show, but boy, that's it. That's an incredible job that they did, tirelessly.
How many of the original cast was there at what am I trying to say? Were they cast individually, or were they all there?
Oh no, the cast was individual. I think the first one was Michael Richards. Now Larry knew Michael Richards from Fridays. Larry was an actor on Fridays. He was always used to escort Howdy Doody. This way, Mr. Doody. This way, Mr. Doody. And he also played Larry in the Three Stooges. Larry played Larry in the Three Stooges. He was one of the ensemble on Fridays that John Moffat, and Pat Lee produced. I thought it was a wonderful show. Andy Kaufman had some incidents on that show where he walked out on a live sketch. But Michael Richards was the first one, and he auditioned, and we were at the Century Plaza Hotel because there was some sort of meetings for NBC, so Brandon Tartikoff wanted to be there, so we did it in a suite. He came up and read in a suite with Jerry and Larry David and Howard, myself, and Brandon Tartikoff. And he came in and he read, and he finished up reading like he did yoga, and he finished up the reading like standing on his head at the end. And Brandon Tartikoff says, well, if you want to go for funny. So he was cast, and then And then after that, it was Jason Alexander. We saw, he was in New York actually at the time. And Mark Hirschfeld was the casting director, and he was in New York. And we had to put him on tape because he was in New York. I think he was doing a play. And so Mark, I think, read with him, and he did the reading. And Jerry and Larry and Howard and I were in a screening room watching Jason Alexander. And everyone said, that's him. That's George Costanza. It was absolutely amazing. And he did come in and read later on just to seal the deal. But as soon as we saw him, just shows you that a bit of casting tape, 3-4 minutes of a tape, reading the lines from the pilot, you just knew that him. He said, I think he said, I was doing Woody Allen. He was doing Woody Allen type of delivery. And then Julia Louis-Dreyfus just came in. We were, reading a whole slew of people. And as soon as Julia walked in, Jerry said, that's it. I mean, there was no question about it. And they had a lot of big stars reading for that. Rosie O'Donnell read. She was very good. A lot of them were very good, but just that chemistry, it's an amazing chemistry that Jerry had with Julia.
They were so good that you thought that there was preconceived. You said, well,
Right.
those people all started together.
Yeah, no, all the casting was done totally individually.
Were the characters based on anyone that you all
Well,
knew?
like we all know Carol Leifer.
Mm-hmm.
Elaine Bennis was based on Carol Leifer, who was Jerry's girlfriend when they started out in comedy. And that worked great because they're great friends to this day. And she enjoyed hanging out with the boys, and that was Julia, just such an incredible job, so believable as being a pal of these guys and being part of it, and that chemistry was totally amazing.
It was, and to handle the sexual element of it was remarkable. Everything about that show was remarkable.
George, the span of your career, is there anything that really stands out that among your proudest achievements in terms of like, deals you put together or shows you packaged together or things that you just feel like that was it, I did that one? And
Well, I was proud of a few things. I was proud working with Bill Persky and Sam Denoff, whose Bill Dana was essential in launching their career. And they created this fabulous series called That Girl, starring Marlo Thomas. And they went on to do specials, they won Emmys for the Dick Van Dyke Show. I had sent scripts, spec scripts to Carl Reiner, and they ended up doing the Dick Van Dyke Show, and they did specials for Bill Cosby and Sid Caesar and Mary Tyler Moore. So that was something I was very proud of. And of course, Seinfeld, when you believe in someone that much and it turns out to be like one of the most successful shows in history. Also, Carl Reiner, who blessed the Seinfeld pilot. First of all, Carl introduced Jerry Seinfeld to the world of late night television, prime time television, because Jerry only did 6 minutes up till then. And he got an HBO special. Chris Albrecht, in his infinite wisdom, ordered a special in 1987 called Stand Up Confidential, starring Jerry Seinfeld. And Carl Reiner introduced him at the beginning of the show. He said, "You're in for a treat," because primetime audiences never saw Jerry before. And he introduced him beautifully. And then when we shot the Seinfeld pilot at Renmar Studios, formerly Cahuenga, Desilu Cahuenga, the Seinfeld pilot was shot on the same stage where the Dick Van Dyke Show shot for 5 years. And Carla was there, and he was showing around Rob Petrie and Laura's living room and kitchen, and it was a spiritual experience. He was showing them, and Jerry was in awe. And that's where we shot Seinfeld Chronicles, the pilot for Seinfeld. So we feel that Carl blessed the series. And as I told you, Carl, that's so proud of him, being 85 years old and being creative, having this creative energy that doesn't stop. And I guess Seinfeld and Man on the Moon, and I've had a nice ride. And then there's more to come. Interview me in a couple of years. So thank you very much.
Well, thank
Thank you, George.
And
I think that's, I can't believe how fast.
I know it
It's
went,
three, it's
it went-
3:30.
Well, I just want to make sure.
Would
that
you
we're
believe it?
Thanks
okay,
for the
but-
plugs.
Yeah, he
Well,
needs
it's all,
them.
Billy, you know, it's all true.
Okay, so
Oh,
I'm gonna
what
move
else did
back
I
from
leave out?
Nashville.
What else did I leave out? Any other
Well, we
quotes?
had one
Okay,
question about
you
advice,
had
yeah.
mentioned something
Yeah.
about being honest with
Yes.
people, being honest with the superstars, you know, with egos and so forth. And so, in my experience, I feel the best thing to do is to be truthful, because you'll get respect with the truth. You may want to present the truth with a little diplomacy, you know, handle it with care, but I think conveying the truth is very important for people that are on a very high level. Also, I think there's another quote from Jerry Seinfeld saying that show business has an escalator, a down escalator that is just as efficient as an up escalator. So when you're having all this adulation, and especially if it happens young, you gotta connect with the people you're working with. You have to connect with the work and the people you're with. Jerry had respect for everybody on Seinfeld, every grip, everybody. They all loved him, and he was very caring, and that's, I think, helps sustain you, because things get around so fast. When you have an ego and you don't treat people right, boy, it spreads like a virus throughout show business. So my advice is to be honest. Like Andy Kaufman always said, he never ever wanted me to be a yes man, which I wasn't. He said, and his idol was Elvis Presley. And Elvis, no one told Elvis, you know, to cut down on the drugs and the food and everything else. Everyone said, yeah, whatever you want. And I mean, I never would have been a yes man, but that's why I helped be so honest with Andy, even though we disagreed on a lot of things. So I think that's an important element. But that escalator analogy that Jerry came up with is so true.
You have your button.
We have a tradition. Our last question is obvious, but it seems to work. Was it worth it?
Was it worth it? Yes, I like the path that I took. I can't tell you the joy I got from working in this business. I think it keeps me young and active. You know, there's a lot of business, they make you retire. In show business, you know, that's why I booked Jerry for his 100th birthday concert, and I will be there. I might be 120 something, but I will be there. And you're all invited in my private jet. Yes, it was worth it. I'm having fun.
That's the important
And I thank you very much. And I hope I look good, John. I hope I look good. I have an ego. I don't like to look funny.
You look marvelous.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you
George,
very
Thank you,
much.
Thank
Georgie.
you so much. It was